It's the 26th July 2022. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the Nuclear Proctologist.org. Normally that shows up in the lower thirds, along with my phone number, 709-589-4406. But I smurfed up doing updates and snuffed out my lower thirds. And I got to get hold of them to help me do the updates. So we got a poll for everybody tonight. Should radiation therapy, like chemo, be banned in hospitals worldwide and labeled crimes against humanity? And I can help you understand that. So you get so-called radiation therapy. Introduction to radiation injuries, a silent epidemic. Radiation-induced. So if you get radiation therapy, here's what happens to your body. Just a fraction of it. I'm going to show it to you. So you get radiation-induced injuries to your eyesight, to your visual pathways, radiation injuries to your heart, cardiac injuries from radiation treatment for breast cancer, radiation-induced kidney injuries, hypoxia associated with chronic radiation-induced lung injuries. You have a lack of oxygen because you destroyed all your red blood cells. And so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses. Blood-spinal cord barrier disruption. All of these are as horrible as they sound. Central nervous system radiation injuries. Radiation-induced lung injuries. Bowel injuries. Lower intestine tracts, kidney injuries from radiation, breast radiation injury litigation because there's so many women. There was over 10 million women who actually had their breasts removed that actually didn't have breast cancer. It had come out a few years back in America. Central, so it's guaranteed to happen everywhere else. Central nervous system radiation injury. Injury to the cranial nerves. Injuries to the head and neck from radiation. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Devastating injuries, by the way. Small bowel injuries. Radiation injury. Radiation-related breast injuries. Brain narcosis from radiation injuries. The worst-case scenario, folks. Radiation-induced rectal injuries. Yay. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injuries. Radiation injuries to your heart valves. All your entire bodies. They attack, allegedly they're attacking a tumor, and then they destroy your whole function, all your entire body. And it's not just one injury, there are multiple injuries happen. Radiation injuries to the central nervous system. Acute injury of your glands during radiation therapy. Radiation-induced liver diseases. Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. Brain radionarcosis. Radiation-induced spinal cord. Growth plate injuries from radiation injuries, radiation therapy-induced cardiac injuries, radiation injury to the optic nerves, radiation-induced cognitive impairment, insufficiency fractures of the femur 18 years after radiation therapy, 18 years later, radiation-induced skin wounds, surgical treatment of intestinal radiation injury. Decades after radiation therapy, several decades later, injuries. And radiation-associated cancer risk among injured children. Radiation-associated cancer. Impaired wound healings after radiation therapy. Radiation death. And so my sister-in-law had gotten cancer recently, and they gave her radiation therapy up on the mainland. I found out about it too late. We got her on the DC-8, restored her blood, 100%. Her blood is perfect, but the chemotherapy has just destroyed her body, and she hasn't got much time left. And it drives me insane, right? That so many victims. All the hospitals are murdering us with this radiation. You got to sign a piece of paper saying you can do it. You can't sue the scumbag industry. The studies, and I'll just show you one more study on chemotherapy. Asks the question of what are we doing, right? Why are we using chemotherapy? Such an abysmal legacy. The study was repeated. Recent. Yeah, it's just such a heartbreaking topic, isn't it? Trillions of dollars in research. Every facet of it just breaks my heart. She's up there, lid down on the doggy mat with the doggy, waiting to die. And my sister-in-law's only comfort she can find is to get down on the dog mat and hug her dog, because she's been denied a life because of she believed in radiation, believed in the industry, and like everybody else that believes in it, they're exterminated. Around 2% survives. Kevin Blanche was one of them. Typically, 3% is the misdiagnosis, which is typical survival rate. The overall contribution of curative and adjuvant chemotherapy to 5-year survival in adults was 2.3% in Australia, 2.1% in USA. So Kevin Blanche was one of those 2.1%. But everybody else died. So if Kevin was saved and everybody else died, is it a cure? So this study was done in 1985 based on facts and was repeated in 2004. Basically what they said was it's better not to get any treatment whatsoever than it is to get chemo. That was the consensus among the academics. Spending trillions of dollars. A second paragraph, halfway through it. Trillions of dollars in research to get a 2% survival rate. And we're still doing it in every hospital. It was discovered that human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than the animal kidneys are at removing plutonium. So the studies on the animals for survival for plutonium is dire, right? Perhaps everyone should contemplate thinking of chemotherapy as the alternative route. So March the 18th, this presentation from TEPCO was on the 17th, was 6 days after the tsunami. They'd done this particular video. It has a total of 620 views. When I grabbed it last year, I think it was last year I grabbed this stuff. Or the year before, actually. So one thing about all the links under the government's official narrative, all the links were dead. The guy with the blue...
My name is Nishiyama.
Or the white...
I'm a Director General for International Trade Policy. But
so he's the International Director for Trade and Policy. For Trade and Policy. He's not a nuclear academic or nuclear scientist. He's not a nuclear professor. He's not from a nuclear corporation. So why is he in charge? Very disturbing.
This time, I'm in charge of nuclear and industrial safety and safety agency. Yeah.
So now he's in charge of the nuclear safety agency. Just like flick of a switch. They didn't put a nuclear academic in charge of the nuclear meltdown. They put this sack of shit right there. And he's an incredible, despicable...
First of all, I'd like to update the most recent status of 6 plants belonging to Fukushima Daiichi #1 site. If I may categorize those 6 plants according to the nature of the operation of those plants, Unit 1, 2, and 3 were operating when the earthquake occurred. And right now, they are having introduction of seawater to cool down the fuel inside the pressured vessel.
Okay, and so the pressure vessels are at over 1,000 psi. The whole part of that country was washed away. It was around 680 kilometers of coastline was washed away. So he's saying, talking about, now he doesn't, up until that day, he knew nothing about nuclear, and he still doesn't. He's just reading whatever's in front of him. But why is he in charge?
And as you can see from the handouts, the seawater has been pumped through fire extinguishing carts from the sea to the pressured vessel, and sometimes in containment vessel too.
So again, he's claiming they're pumping salt water. Now the buildings, this is on the 17th, so all the reactors have already blown up. There's zero possibility, and I mean zero possibility, that they're pumping water into the pressure vessels or the containment vessels or the reactors. They have all been breached, and it's lethal doses. You can't possibly accomplish. Now, he was a trade minister who got a promotion to a nuclear, and there's tons of nuclear scientists in that country. Or so they claim. None of them went to Fukushima, mind you.
And I'd like to avoid a detailed explanation. If it's necessary, I'll touch upon later, according to your questions, responding to your questions.
And see, Stephen Young is here tonight. Just awesome to see. We were worried because he's been really sick the last couple of years. And still got a long way to go to recover it. So good to see you, Stephen. I hope you're having a reasonable day. I know you're not having a good day, but I hope you're having a reasonable day.
But if I may touch upon the characteristics of each plant.
I'll show them to you in a minute.
The first unit has a relatively stable stage right now, status right now. But in the past, there was a possibility that the fuel might be somewhat damaged.
First off, this is 6 days after the tsunami. He's talking like it's 2 years later. And he's talking about the fuel might be damaged, and he was a trade minister, not a nuclear expert. Now he's the nuclear go-to guy in Japan. No training in nuclear whatsoever. First off, the Unit 1 and 2 exhaust stacks, not the reactors, quite a ways away from the reactors, those tall, skinny stacks, were over 10 sieverts per hour. This is a lethal dose almost right away. For sure you die that day. 10 sieverts is considered a fatal dose of radiation. So Fukushima workers says the smoke was pouring out of reactor 1 before the tsunami hit. So the the earthquake had shifted the country 6 or 7 feet. It disconnected the high volume water intake, and what that meant was now it wasn't getting 4,500 tons every minute of water into each of the reactors, which means they melt down almost right away if they don't get, because that's a lot, 1 million gallons every minute. So think of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks. And imagine them with a ton of water in the back of it, and you got to get that into the reactor every minute. 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks of water every minute. Reactor 1, on the same day that he's claiming everything is hunky-dory, was over 1 million sieverts per hour, which meant you were not getting anywhere near these buildings. This is lethal doses from very long distances away. Unit 2 was completely liquefied. It's important that you understand these couple of facets because of what he's going to say next. And I've never seen that in the history of it, which meant 100% meltdown. But you're talking temperatures of 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which meant the fuel pool right directly above it, the world's stupidest place to put a fuel pool, would have melted down immediately within 5 minutes of this happening, which is what we know happened. This reactor burnt continuously, was reactor 2, burnt continuously for several days, and hemorrhaged radiation into the environment.
And regarding Unit 2, it was not confirmed whether its suppression chamber was damaged or not. Actually, there was a big explosion type of noise around the Unit 2 area, but it was not confirmed that that was, at the beginning, it was said to be from the Plant 2, Unit 2, but still it was not confirmed whether the containment vessel or suppression pool of Unit 2 was damaged.
First off, it was. Think about this headline here. Western Tokyo may have been contaminated, and the radiation plume fell to the ground after number 2 core was exposed. Right alongside of it was this reactor, number 3. So number 3 looks like that. Number 2 looks like the right, number 3 to your left. So which one would you think would contaminate Tokyo visually? Would you say the one to the left or the one to the right? Because he says the one to the right.
Because in the past, for some length of time, the fuel was not covered by the water.
The fuel was not covered by the water, which means it catches fire. The zirconium cladding will catch fire. Now, this is 6 days after the tsunami, just 2 days after the last reactor detonated. These are what the reactors looked like as he was talking. That's exactly what they would have looked like. That's a picture, one of the first pictures ever taken. Reactor 4 to your left and reactor 3 to your right. Both of these buildings were 190 feet tall, 150 feet wide.
And regarding Unit 3,
Unit 3 is this reactor right here. What remains of it, right?
And regarding Unit 3, once the pressure inside the containment vessel became very high, and at that time the water was disturbed to be let into the containment vessel. So there is a possibility that the fuel was somehow damaged.
So he's saying there's a possibility that building, the fuel was damaged. A possibility, folks. First off, he's a trade minister, not a nuclear expert. And on the 17th, he was appointed the nuclear spokesperson. So he's going to speak about a topic that's incredibly complicated, particularly when you facet in the fact that you have multiple nuclear reactors melted down in fuel pools. And they put somebody who knows zero, absolutely zero about it in charge instead of nuclear academics or nuclear scientists. That day, actually, they had 54 nuclear power plants in Japan. So there's a pretty good possibility they had a few nuclear scientists kicking around, okay? So Japan putting him, now this was the Prime Minister's office, right? That appointed him. The very worst person. And he took the job on top of that. That's the remains of Reactor 3. The fuel pools obviously can't exist. Report of hoax. This was October 22nd, 2012. An irresponsible rumor claims Fukushima spent fuel pool exploded. They were talking about Reactor 4. And so the fuel pool's at the top of the building that actually doesn't exist anymore. Yet the media was out calling it a hoax, claiming the fuel pools had exploded. Like, there's no reason for the entire population of Japan not to cut the throat of every journalist in the country. There really isn't.
Regarding Unit 4, 4, 5, and 6, they were...
So you're talking about Reactor 4, Reactor 5, and Reactor 6. This is 6 days after.
Stopped under maintenance when the earthquake occurred. And the characteristics of Unit 4 is that it was during the during this period of inspection, periodic inspection, it has a exchange of shroud within the pressured vessel. So all the spent fuel, all the fuel was delivered to the spent fuel pool. So the spent fuel pool, the amount of spent fuel within the pool is regarding of the Unit 4 was the largest one. So right now it was
they're all the
taken
same
care
size.
of by the following way. But I will touch upon later this.
Well, like, first off, that's reactor 4 to the right. That's the official picture. And the picture to your left is the official picture of the fuel pool in a building that no longer exists. So the fuel pools would have been at the very top of the buildings. And the reactor core is at the top of the building. Now, when they're down for maintenance, they don't take all the fuel out of the reactor. They take out a chunk of it, which meant there was a chunk of fuel still in the reactor, probably 2/3. These reactors are 720 tons.
Regarding Unit 5, 5 and 6, those are relatively stable, and no big problems were found right now. Regarding Unit 5, there is only one surviving diesel generator with Unit 6, and Unit 5 is borrowing small power from this diesel power generator of the Unit 6, and its cooling system is now operated by was moved by the small electricity from the diesel generator of the Unit 6.
So now he's claiming Unit 6. First off, you need external power to start up the generators. These are huge, incredibly huge generators, by the way. It typically takes a day to get these things ready to start up.
But we have to be, I think we have to be careful to check the appropriate level of water and pressure inside the pressured vessel.
Now, he had to sit down with a nuclear scientist to get his story straight. Remember, he's a minister of trade, and nuclear is a very complicated topic. Even when everything is perfect, it's extremely complicated. But a meltdown is absurdness. TEPCO used radioactive water from reactor 5 and 6 to spray throughout Fukushima plant over 100 tons a day. Now, the reactors typically need 4,500 tons a minute. You're talking about multiple reactor buildings on top of that. We're talking each reactor. None of it makes any sense, right? They're saying they're spraying radioactive water from reactor 5 and 6, but they're not saying how, which is far away. Very, very far away from the other 4 buildings. They're not acknowledging, or they're not explaining why the water is radioactive or how it became radioactive. Obviously, they had an event there. Reactor 5 and Reactor 6, and pictures that were released last year were pixelated. You couldn't see it, or the pump house, or the stack alongside of it. New 311 footage showed disaster loomed at Fukushima Reactor 5. Reactor number 5 cooling system stops, backup not working. Reactor 1 was melting 50 minutes after the cooling stopped. So they're going to wait until the morning to fix the cooling in number 5. This was the end of May 2001. So what they're saying is they never had power at number 5 and 6 at the end of May. March, April, May. So say 75 days later, they actually didn't have power at reactor 5 like they had claimed in other stories, right? Because there's proof right there. They're waiting for morning to work on a broken reactor 5 cooling system. Nobody knows how many lies these people have told, but it's in the hundreds of thousands. TEPCO at Fukushima I don't believe TEPCO went near these buildings. As far as I know, this was the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the so-called disposable people, and there's not that many left. Trouble at Fukushima Reactor 5 and 6, the cracks are allowing in radioactive water that could destroy emergency generator and other vital equipment. So that's April the 5th. But in the next month, in May, at the end of it, they didn't have power there. They had to wait till daylight. So this wasn't true. White smoke from Fukushima Daiichi reactors number 6 turbine buildings on July the 2nd. Now, reactor 6, like I said, the pictures that came out last year were all pixelated. Let me see if I can find them for you very quick. It's not necessary, but sometimes it doesn't hurt. Only problem is I got such a big, massive amount of material over the years. Well, we're looking. Might as well wait. Hang on. I'm here. I'll get the pictures now. Here we go. Now there's 760 pictures released last year. The one up in the top center is Reactor 6. So these were taken from a drone and they were released in January of last year on the 10th anniversary. What was unusual was that nobody's ever talked about these pictures, only me. So when I zoomed in on the pictures, what I discovered was everything was pixelated except for Reactor 5. But Reactor 1, 2, 3, 4 were pixelated. So were the pump houses on the seaside, which is this side right here. And you can see the pump house on 6 is pixelated out. And so was the common spent fuel pool, which was at the same height as Reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. So why is Reactor 6 and the tower, the skinny tower, they pump radiation up, why are they all pixelated? That's a serious question that people need to address. And white smoke was coming out of it also in July. Reactor 6 had over 6 feet of contaminated water in the turbine building, which is the one to the right that is pixelated. Record high 10 million becquerels a liter of strontium. Emitters revealed in Fukushima plant groundwater 1,000% more than TEPCO has claimed for the last 6 months. So you had an event there to get these numbers. An event being some kind of meltdown. Cesium found near the drainage gates of Reactor 5 and 6 were coming from those reactors. And so now we got a picture of reactor 5 and 6. But originally, these were all pixelated.
And the power was out at the time of earthquake in this whole 6 plants. And the TEPCO has been endeavoring to recover the power. And I heard that today they would start the reconstruction of power from the outside source, outside the transmission line.
So this was on the 17th of March, 6 days after the tsunami hit, just 2 days after nuclear detonations from, say, reactor 3. But when he's talking about external power, I want to show you a couple of pictures to help articulate the ludicrous of that statement. Here we go. So, I need one more picture. Hang on. I might never find it, unfortunately. I wanted a map. I'll find it. Hang on. I want the map of the tsunami and the deaths. Hang on. We almost got it now. Such a complicated story, right? The best way to tell the story is like I tell it, where you provide all the documentation as you're talking. Unfortunately, that's just a silly amount of work. So 680 kilometers of the country was swallowed by a tsunami. I don't know what I got done with the map. Normally the map is always in my way. So for today, I really need that map to tell the story. One more try here. I can't win them all. Because like the equipment I'm using, I can store 10,000 headlines and pictures in each window. And I have 8 windows on each side. And that might sound like a lot, but I can fill that up pretty quick because I do so many shows, right? It's shocking how quick I fill up. Okay, so you had the whole country was washed away. How are you going to restore power when you got 680 kilometers of coastline worked away?
And regarding today's development,
this is the last one. Japanese.
Of course, typical people are there, around several hundred, not only typical, but also other cooperating.
He was the trade minister. He's not a nuclear academic, so why is he talking? So within 1 year, they had an extra 865,000 cancers because people like him didn't allow the country to respond appropriately. He said, no, it's all under control. Nothing was under control. No, there's no radiation releases. No, there was huge, massive releases. So if he didn't do that, if the nuclear industry didn't come in and do that, they could have come up with some solutions to mitigate some of the ridiculously brutal assault upon 8 million species. By doing his consistent lies, now he does this each day, and he's not even a nuclear scientist. He was appointed on the 17th as... It's just madness.
First of all, I'd like to update the most recent status of 6 plants belonging to Fukushima Daiichi #1 site.
Okay, maybe this one here. Hang on.
My name is Nishiyama. I'm a Director General for International Trade Policy, but this time I'm in charge of nuclear and industrial safety and...
So he was the minister in charge of trade and policy. Now he's in charge of nuclear. And that was the day he got appointed that. Rather than appoint a nuclear expert or nuclear professor or nuclear academic, they appointed the least qualified. So there was no way to help Japan, because Japan made sure they couldn't help themselves. The nuclear industry sabotaged their only chance for the world to come up with a solution, and by proxy set us on the course to make everybody and all species on the planet sick. It's disgusting, boy. Evacuation orders on Fukushima nuclear plant town to be lifted in August. Well, again, that's not true. It's on a little tiny part of the town. But the headline says it's going to be... So anybody who's using the headlines will regurgitate that particular lie, right? Evacuation order imposed in parts of the town hosting the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in 2011 due to high radiation levels. High radiation levels will be lifted on August the 30th on part of the town. Residents of Fukushima can now permanently return. You can't cross the street or anything, but you can return. Since March 2011, was designated as a special base for reconstruction, revitalization in a nuclear wasteland. As a special base. What a stupid, bizarre industry. This makes just part of a little area. The third area to see part of the evacuation order lifted in 6 municipalities to reduce radiation as well as infrastructure development has been carried out to enable residents to return to a little tiny fraction of the community. This is madness. In June, evacuation orders were lifted for part of the town of Okuma. So the first one was Fukushima, then it's Okuma, which is on the other side of the plant. These are just a couple of miles away. Which also hosts the Tokyo Electric Power Company's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear meltdowns, as well as for part of the village of Katsuro. So the area in Fukushima where part of the evacuation order to be lifted covers 5.5 square miles around the train station. They hope to have 2,000 people there by 2030 in the next 8 years, which would still be less than 30% of the numbers of residents prior to the accident. So their high hopes is to have 2,000 people in the next 8 years, which is 30% of the population that normally went there. Whoever moves back there will get sick from doing that and die from it eventually, if not sooner. Like the industry is insane. The industry is actually, it seems like everybody in the nuclear industry is actually batshit stupid and insane. They're actually insane. They're delusional on top of that. Along with other areas of Fukushima, which saw evacuation orders lifted in March, 15% of the town will now be able to have residents. Can't cross the street, can't breathe the air, can't drink the water, can't escape the radiation, no matter how hard you try. So what's the point of media when they're going to come out and pretend that everything is hunky-dory? It leaves 85% of the town under difficult-to-return zone with high levels of radiation. Does anybody really think radiation doesn't shift around with the wind or weather? Is anybody actually that stupid besides the nuclear industry? These people should be captured. Their brains should be taken out and studied to see how they were able to tie their own fucking shoes. The three other municipalities of Tomoka, Nami, and Lydia are expected to see similar restrictions. 5, 10, 15% of the town open in the spring of next year. Which is, you can see the Fukushima plant is right here. And behind me you can see the scale. I think it's 6 miles. Is it 5 miles or something? Let me fix that. I can't fix everything. Oh, yeah, there we go. Blocking the light, apparently. I don't know anymore. So Tomoka is quite a ways away. Fukushima dining now on each side of that is Okuma and Futaba. That's the two towns they were talking about. But they're also talking about Tomoka and Nami, and up there is Lydiat. And Lydiat is probably 30 kilometers away. And it's a no-go zone. But it's safe to be at the nuclear meltdown site. It's the strangest thing imaginable, really. It's hard to find a piece of nuclear stories where they're actually not insane, right? Okay, so compared to that, to where the food was banned from almost half of Japan. It should have been Tokyo too, right? Well, it should have been all the way to Hiroshima. And these are the big prefectures. So food was banned from them for a decade by 55 countries. These communities are still off limit. They're growing food all around these places and shipping them. They never stop shipping the food from the nuclear wasteland. Something new to worry about. Dirty Bombs by Terra di SONENSHINE. Not long ago, I took an online course in lab safety in anticipation of joining the faculty of Tufts University. Although I am not teaching in the hard sciences, I was intrigued by the course title, although dubious that I would ever encounter chemical or radioactive waste in my job. Then I read a warning last week from the Government Accountability Office, GAO, Government Accountability Office. We'll call it GAO from here on in, about the risks we all face from the increasing danger posed by radioactive materials, especially if a terrorist got hold of some. So add this to your worry list of dirty bombs. So dirty bomb is where the actors take conventional explosives, wrap it around a radiological catch and detonate it. I'm going to show you radiation fallout from Fukushima. We'll compare it to a dirty bomb. So this model is based on ultimately 19 days of a dirty bomb known as Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. You can see the dirty bomb covered the entire planet in radioactive fallout in 19 days. They're burning radiation in the incinerators across the entire country of Japan. Billions of tons of radioactive material that they're burning. That gets liberated into the environment. That's dirty bombs. But Tara is talking about the risks of a dirty bomb attack are increasing. It's really hard to pick out a dirty bomb from what Japan has already done to the entire planet. Radioactive materials do important work in cancer treatment. I showed you at the beginning how that's simply not true. It's a genocide machine is what it actually is. Food inspections, X-ray technologies you can do with light and computer, laboratory research, and they help scientists develop new treatments and drugs. No, nuclear has infiltrated every facet of our life. It's a genocide machine. From hospitals to meat plants, from nuclear energy facilities to airport securities, we rely on nuclear radiation for critical uses. In the wrong hand, radioactive material can increase the damage inflicted by terrorists, like the nuclear industry, right? Nuclear industry is a terrorist organization. The Government Accountability Office began reporting on dirty bombs in 2019, saying saying that their use could trigger mass evacuations. Not Fukushima, though, which is infinitely worse than any dirty bomb anybody will ever set off. Just disgusting. This industry is just disgusting. In fact, part of the impetus for the study was an accidental release of cesium, which was 2 grams. We covered this story multiple times, and over a year, when it showed up, we covered it. A radioactive substance in 2019, the University of Washington Research and Training Building cost millions of dollars to clean up from that one accident. It was 2 grams of cesium, cost millions and millions of dollars. You can't actually fix a building because it ends up in your air ductwork and in the walls and everything else. You can't actually physically get rid of it without disposing of the building on a nuclear waste site. Well, they don't have a waste site. They have holding sites. Ended up costing millions of dollars. Today's America's climate of a political extremist, which is the nuclear industry, obviously, has fueled new concerns that a domestic terrorist, which is a nuclear academic, could resort to new tricks to garner attention and intimidate people. It's not unreasonable to think that a terrorist, aka nuclear scientist, particularly an insider, aka nuclear scientist, might try to mix explosives with radioactive power or pellets and set off an explosion that carries radioactive dust into the surrounding area. But don't worry, it's never going to be like Fukushima. I disrespect the people that write these articles, by the way. There's no reason to be so evil. We're the good guys, you remember? Goldstein here in Canada, Lorrie Goldstein, this is just the lobbyists, the mouthpieces for the nuclear industry in Canada. Germany's green energy disaster, since Germany said no to nuclear, every media has to attack Germany at least once a week. Every media on the planet got to attack Germany for saying no to nuclear. Every media has not stopped for 11 years. And is used as a brainwashing tool on top of that. That's frightening that there's an industry that has that reach and that power and that memory, that determination to weaponize the word no. They really are a revolting lot, aren't they? Goldstein's right at the top of it, I might add. Germany, historically the economic powerhouse of Europe, brought to its knees through its reckless pursuit of so-called green energy. So-called pursuit. So-called green energy. By deliberately fortifying its own energy security. The disastrous result is a warning to all nations, including Canada, about the dangers of the pursuit of low carbon, which is what they call nuclear, by the way, energy policies. And nuclear is not low carbon, it's the most carbon intensive thing in human history. In order to make up for the lost energy from closing its nuclear plants, which produces no greenhouse gases or air pollution. First off, every nuclear power plant needs 2 gas, coal, or oil plants just to run it 24 hours a day dedicated to it. So shut up. Second off, it's hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools. They're still splitting the atom. There's no containment. It's so evil, one can barely wrap their mind around how come the world hasn't gone to war against this industry. It was also investing heavily in unreliable wind and solar. If you paired it up with geothermal and tidal energy, it'd be perfect. Because renewables should be geothermal and tidal. So a new company, Quatsi Energies, is going to use X-rays to drill into the Earth 800 feet and tap into 930 degree Fahrenheit temperatures for geothermal energy. So they'd be able to go to existing gas, oil, and coal plants, drill down underneath it, get rid of gas, oil, and coal, and run the site on geothermal with the same equipment. Nuclear has no right to exist, thank goodness. Now we know there's a solution just around the corner. By 2026, they'll be producing energy, and it won't be long before they take over the planet. To back up intermittent wind and solar, which cannot provide baseload power to electric grid on demand. Yeah, well, you would normally use compressed air storage, where you dig mine shafts. If you use the same technology they're trying to apply to deep geological repositories, you can create energy storage by pumping compressed air down into the shafts. And you can run your cities and your country on that alone. Well, for your peak power is what I'm saying, right? Germany's energy disaster demonstrates why Canada, who poisoned everybody in their supermarkets 93 days after Fukushima started melting down, by lifting all restrictions while the rest of the world put in restrictions for 14 prefectures, Canada had no restrictions. So Japan couldn't ship the food anywhere, only Canada. And that's why you're seeing a huge, massive increase in obesity, diabetes, Down syndrome, heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism. There's 1,800 illnesses, not just cancer. Yeah, Lorrie, you're a despicable sack of shit. You're a disgusting parasite. Trying to deceive and manipulate people to go down the wrong path. You should be arrested and prosecuted for being Canada's worst monster. The world mustn't pay for Japan's irresponsible act of dumping the tanks into the Pacific Ocean. So there's supposed to be 1,000 tanks at Fukushima. And the tanks are almost full, and they're going to have to dump them, Dana. There's no solution. The problem with the story, of course, is when you actually look at the research, did I put a... We'll get there. Here we go. So in 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. Today they have 1,000 tanks. How many tanks did you fill up in the last 9 years? So 2013 they had 1,000 tanks. 2014 they had 1,200 tanks. 2017 they had 900 tanks. 2019 they had 1,000 tanks. In 2021 they had 8,000 tanks. In 2022 they have 1,000 tanks. They got 1,000 tanks 2013, 1,000 tanks 2022. So they couldn't have filled up any tanks in the last 9 years. The idea of the tanks was to trick you into thinking they weren't poisoning the Pacific Ocean. That's all the tanks were built specifically for that. The doses in the water is over 2 sieverts per liter of just beta. They're not even acknowledging gamma, alphas, neutrons, which brings it up to 6 and 7 sieverts. These are lethal doses at 3. So if you fill up the tank with just beta at 2.2 sieverts per hour, which is the low numbers, you're talking 1.4 million sieverts. It means you can't build another tank anywhere on site because it's a lethal dose everywhere on site. Imagine if you filled up all the tanks at 1.4 million sieverts each. Well, you can't get within 10 miles of the site. The idea was simply, and this might seem incredible to those who don't understand how deadly nuclear is, but the tanks are actually empty. The tanks were built quickly and they were just bolted together. So it was fairly obvious they weren't going to fill it up because they're going to leak. And they know they're pouring water over melted reactor core, allegedly going to pump it into tanks that leak, which means you can't get close to the tanks, period, let alone, like 2 liters is a lethal dose. If there's 2 liters 50 feet away from me, I'd be dead before I got this far into the show. Japan claims 1.25 million tons, but a typical reactor would fill up all the tanks 6 times each day, pre-Fukushima meltdowns. Google former head Eric Schmidt says artificial intelligence is as dangerous as a nuclear weapon. And Eric Schmidt, of course, anybody don't know Eric Schmidt, he was a sadistic attack dog for the nuclear industry. I'm sorry for Google, which is Alphabet. He's the engineer of YouTube, one of the big engineers of YouTube. He re-engineered it, because YouTube was created by somebody else. Google bought it, and then weaponized it with the military against the population. Now it's no longer functional, right? I've been doing this show for a decade, and I got 34 wonderful people on my show. But it should be at least 34,000. How's our poll doing tonight? Should radiation therapy, chemo, be banned in hospitals worldwide and labeled a crime against humanity? If you're not familiar with that, go back and watch the beginning of the video. I provided all kinds of academic studies that help quantify those assertions. Eric Schmidt said he was naive about the impact of what we were doing, but that arming AI could trigger the other side. First off, it's zero possibility he was naive. It's zero possibility that Eric Schmidt was naive. It's actually zero. He's a terrible person. He got paid billions of dollars to be a terrible person on top of that, to come up with the software to weaponize and restrict the population. Global Nuclear Hydrogen Group was formed. There's how many millions of groups have this industry got formed? A global coalition of 40 participants is not a coalition. A coalition is typically used for the military-industrial complex, by the way, is launching a nuclear hydrogen initiative Tuesday to advance development of a dying, failing, genocidal technology. Hydrogen has promise, says nobody but people who wants to make money off it, but faces hurdles such as the huge amount of electricity required to produce it, and the hydrogen effect on the atmosphere if it's leaked out. Does anybody really think it's not going to be leaked out all the time, everywhere? Others include nuclear plant operator Entergy and Constellation. And government entities, including the International Atomic Energy Agency. Government entities. First off, the International Atomic Energy Agency is part of the United Nations, which is a corporation, not a government. They can't change your constitutions or your Magna Cartas or your Bill of Rights. They can't arrest you. They can't give you fines. They got their authority through administration, not legislation of any countries. They're just a corporation, international corporation, of 195 incredibly evil military industrial complexes. Like Nato, right? Actually, I got some stories on Nato right around the corner here. Idaho National Laboratory, all the national laboratories in the United States are built on the biggest aquifers, freshwater aquifers in the country, and all of them have contaminated their aquifers for millions of years. Carlos Leipner, who directs Global Nuclear Energy Strategy at the Clean Air Task Force, Global Nuclear Energy Strategy. It's like they call nuclear clean air. It's like calling Charles Manson a Girl Scout. It's absurdness. Every time I heard the word climate scientist, I want to vomit. They were created to promote nuclear. Like James Hansen, right? The disgusting James Hansen. Hydrogen can increase the amount of methane, tropospheric ozone, stratospheric water vapors in the air, each of which enhance warming. These are all created by nuclear power plants boiling 1 million gallons of water a minute, and each glass would have 1 billion creatures in it. So 16 billion glasses, 16 million glasses times 1 billion creatures every minute in each reactor. But the fuel pools are all still splitting the atoms worldwide, over 1,000 of them, hemorrhaging. Instead of splitting atoms to boil water for 1 million homes in each reactor core in each pool, which is full of multiple reactor cores, those atoms are still being split, but they're released up to tall, skinny stacks, which is why most nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms to catch the radiation, and then it gets shipped to the supermarkets. The majority of nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms, right? NATO told to take nuclear weapons off the table in a worrying bid to outsmart Putin. NATO is clear that if the fundamental security of an ally were to be threatened, NATO has the capability and resolve to launch nuclear weapons. You can't defend yourself by using nuclear weapons because you can't cash your checks anymore. This would be installed in 1945, detonation of atomic bombs over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, the scary thing about Jan, which is the Governor General, Director General of NATO, is he's just like Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson is now tapped, I should say, to become the next Secretary General of NATO. Boris Johnson, who lifted restrictions on all the prefectures in Japan for radioactive food to ship it to Britain a couple of days before 50 people in his cabinet quit due to his incompetency, is now tipped Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is tipped to be the next Governor General, Secretary General of NATO. Why don't you just get a baboon and dress him up and put him in charge? Because you can be sure he's going to make better decisions than Boris. It's surreal that is even possible that Boris Johnson. NATO urged to withdraw nuclear weapons for Europe because NATO is completely out of control. It was created back after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Because of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had been like Gorbachev, instead of letting some other politicians come in and fix things, decided to dissolve the country. That's the scariest thing imaginable. So everybody lost the patents in the country, for starters, and the pensions of the country. Like, how could you ever trust a politician after that? Pope Francis suggested conflict would perhaps somehow provoked, recalling a conversation that he has warned NATO was barking at the gates of Russia. Boris Johnson tipped to become the next Secretary General. It's not funny. That's the gallows laugh. It's like putting a hamster in charge, right? And all the nuclear weapons are on strings. If the hamster chews through a string, sets off a nuclear weapon. I wouldn't let Boris Johnson drive a go-kart, let alone be in charge of nuclear weapons. It's absurd. He'd need to quit as MP. Really? You think he's not? Which is appointed unanimously by NATO member countries. They're like, yeah, they like the idea of a British because of the U.S. distrust of Union figures. Britain is trusted by the Baltic states for some bizarre reason. And Mr. Johnson personally has won the international credit for helping to build the international coalition against Russia. He won international credit for help building the international coalition against Russia in February. So you got a handful of people can destroy everything for everybody, and that's what he's done repeatedly. Everywhere. Everything he touched has been destroyed. NATO looks like an executive arm of the Biden administration. Well, it is. Tech experts needs defense training for NATO's race against China. Because NATO's picking on everybody worldwide. It's 30, if you look up NATO, it says 30 militaries. So it's hard to appreciate how evil NATO actually is. But you have to scale it up dramatically now to appreciate how evil the United Nations is, which is 195 militaries. How NATO's expansion led to Putin's invasion. Former NATO chief, these are all headlines from the last couple of days. Former NATO chief rips into Macron, French president, French puppet, for his disastrous suggestion Putin shouldn't be humiliated. That's the two of the weirdos right there. Oh, there's an opening for NATO in the Arctic. So NATO is like a plague on your planet. NATO's new strategic concept is a dangerous plan to preserve Western power through global militarism. And the stupidest flag in human history, the NATO flag. NATO is extending its operating domains beyond land, air, and sea to information, cyber, and space. Just like the United Nations, where they take over your planet in increments, and without the consensus, without referendums, all of a sudden they're your new leaders, and there's nothing you can do about it because they captured your country through deceit and deception. NATO wants to expand its forces from 40,000 to 300,000 troops. So, like once the Soviet Union collapsed, NATO was supposed to be disbanded. They had so much power, you can't get rid of them. They're a threat now, all of a sudden, to all species. The North Atlantic Treaty, again, was created because of the Soviet Union. When that was resolved and they were supposed to be disbanded, now they attack. Everybody's their enemy. That's how they see the world now. Including people in NATO or their possible enemies. NATO bombed Bosnia, Serbia, Kosovo. People that couldn't fight back, right? It launched wars in Afghanistan, fired 5.5 million rounds a month for 9 years. In Iraq, then to Syria, then Libya, millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans, then to the next country. They got 10,000 Taliban in each country. And they still haven't got the Taliban all these years later. It's building a military footprint in Africa and Asia. It invited pathetic Australia, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, the so-called Asian Pacific Four to its recent summit. It's expanded its reaches into the Southern Hemisphere, signing a military training partnership agreement with Colombia, In December, it was backed Turkey, with NATO's second largest military, has illegally invaded and occupied Syria as well as Iraq. The Turkish-backed militia are engaged in ethnic cleansing of Syrian Kurds and other inhabitants in north and east Syria, probably because there's a lot of lithium in the mountains and they want that resources for your cell phones. NATO's been accused of war crimes, including multiple airstrikes against refugee camps, chemical weapons that were used. Like the whole, every facet of it is just, they can only exist by being evil. They don't have any redeeming qualities whatsoever. For a military alliance that, as the collapse of the Soviet Union was rendered obsolete, it should have been dismantled. And every facet of that story, like, you should read that story. I can't read it all because we'll be here all night. How Canada helped lead Sweden and Finland in the NATO. Yeah, Canada's an incredible screw-up. NATO leaders tell Europe to stop complaining and help Ukraine. So anybody don't think NATO is an issue are wrong, folks. It's the military-industrial complex, so is United Nations. So you can see how bad NATO is. Imagine how bad United Nations actually is. They're the same thing, right? Except there are 195 militaries versus NATO 30 militaries. Stoltenberg, which is the former Governor General, I guess, said the EU member states should all want to financially support Ukraine as it fends off attacks from Russia. From Russia's President Vladimir Putin's army. It's not Vladimir Putin's army, it's Russia's army. See, you have to have a boogeyman. So for decades and decades, Russia and China have been the boogeyman of America. America has been the boogeyman of China and Russia. They need that, right? That's on purpose. They need that to justify the military spending, the weapons, and everything else. They got to have a boogeyman, right? And North Korea is a boogeyman. People are freaking insane. Boris Johnson is tipped to become the next Secretary General of a genocide organization known as NATO. Russia has one weapon left against NATO, nuclear. Oh no, I can see him using nuclear in the near future. For sure, right? Richard's asking Dana Nasana, I think, something. Because when I see someone ask a question to Dana, because I'm Dana too, right? It gets confusing. Okay, we'll call it a night, I think, with that. We'll call it a night with that. And Victor donated $25 last night. Thank you, Victor. I can't thank you enough to those that do donate. That's the wrong one. There we go. It's really difficult to fund this year, for sure. We got so many things that are broken. Still haven't got the boat in the water, for goodness sakes, right? I'm going to have to try to start it up. I got an oxygen sensor. It's the wrong one, but I'm going to shave it down and see if it'll fit. But the only way to find out if it works is to put the boat in the ocean. We got a mass die-off. Thousands of birds are dying all around here. I should have the parts for my truck. By the looks of it, will be here tomorrow. And so we can get that back on the road. We can tow the bikes or the boat out and start doing some research. We're losing all the species to radiation fallout. Angel's Place. Hi, Angel Place. Andrew B. Andrew. Dana Nasana. Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Chelsea's writing a book, I think. I think James Lucid mentioned that. That's pretty awesome. Albert, James Lucid. Speaking of James Lucid. Hi, James. Snakes and Doggies. Peaceware. Van Horn. John Shiflett. Hi, John. Hi, everybody. It's a good show tonight. We got through lots and lots of stuff. Alicia Don May. Yeah, I don't understand why people choose nuclear eater, Alicia, for sure. Yeah, monkeypox is coming, folks. It's scary stuff, eh? Who knows what they're up to for sure. Richard McCann. Nancy Sands. I've got a tendency to miss people. I noticed lately after I read the comments after, I'm a fucking disaster. Let me do a quick show. John Curtis, Stinker. I'm just going to burn up through the rest of the names here and we'll call it a night. I was going to keep going, but I can feel my voice is pretty raw. Even though I got a cup of tea there tonight, I haven't drank out of it. Starlight, Katja. IPN, TN, hi there, Port Angeles. Hello, everybody. Yeah, it's hard to do the chat with a cell phone, I bet, for people. Unless you get good at it, right? I guess you get good at it. Hugs for Stephen Young. We're glad to see you, Stephen. I hope you're doing okay, my friend. Bless your heart, boy. I know Stephen is trying so hard. He had a nasty illness, stuck him in hospital for quite a long time. It's good to see people just trying. It's not easy, I know. Yeah, Organic Slant is starting to take DCA. Everybody should take DCA as a maintenance. If you're doing it as a maintenance, do like 10 milligrams per kilogram a day, 2 weeks on, a week off, and do that for a couple of months. Do that once a year. That's really good maintenance. You can do 25 milligrams a day, but you want to build up to it over a few days. But 10 milligrams per kilogram is a good idea. Let's come and check the poll before we close the poll down. I take a DCA, doing 25 milligrams per kilogram. And then I'm also taking vitamin B1 to work with that. And vitamin C up to 2,500 milligrams a day. And potassium. So we got 51 votes on the poll. Should radiation therapy, chemo, be banned in hospitals worldwide and labeled crimes against humanity? 92% of the people understand the truth. We're not doing this to be mean to nuclear per se. We're doing it because there's nobody's ever come out and had an honest conversation with this industry before. And after a decade, there's a lot of things we can say for sure, because we've covered it for so many years, right? But what I also do is I provide the documentation for everybody. Alex Bones, DCA, look it up on Amazon.com, those 3 letters. It's a mineral. It's completely harmless. And it's super good for like old man spots, which is a precursor to cancer. It'll eradicate that. If you mix equal parts, a little tiny bit equal parts on a Q-tip, and put it on a wart, it'll destroy the wart typically in like 2 days. You just do it a couple of times. You want to buy the pure DCA though. Canada banned it 5 years ago. They didn't want people treating themselves for cancer. It's no different than taking vitamin C, except it's unique. It restores your blood. And that helps cancel cancer. Cancer can't survive in that environment. It's been known to reduce large tumors by 70% in the first 3 weeks. It's known to reduce tumors within just a few minutes. Start to reduce the tumors. And so Organic Land is taking capsules, which means it's already diluted. So that's okay too. I like to pour stuff because the pure DCA, because then you got control. But it's all good. I took pills before, so it's all good. But because I got a big chunk of cancer in my kidney, I'm trying to change the outcome. Yeah, thanks, Organic. Appreciate it. And Dana Nasana put the name in there for the DCA. I'm not going to butcher it by trying to pronounce it. Yeah, and riding a bike for an hour is great stuff. Exercise is amazing. Any kind of exercise, folks, is amazing for you. The bike is probably the best, most low-impact one on the planet. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great day tomorrow. Great night tonight. I will see everybody at the regular time. We already got a show ready for tomorrow night. It never stops around here. Hugs for everybody. Love everybody. Thank you, everybody. We'll see everybody soon.